What if the most powerful thing your commander could do was make your opponents play the worst creatures ever printed? Hey, I'm Paul from Missing Lands. I'm a guy who's often on the internet and I absolutely adore Commander. When I'm really vibing with a deck, I sit down, take it apart and figure out what makes it tick. So pull up a chair, get comfortable and let's see what's what. Today, we're looking at the Beamtown Bullies. A junk commander with one very simple plan. Put terrible creatures into your graveyard and then donate them to your opponents. Because the bullies can tap to put a creature from your graveyard onto an opponent's battlefield, it gains haste and is goaded, but then it gets exiled at the next end step. And that means something very important, that the creatures enter the battlefield abilities will all still happen, but your opponent is the one who has to deal with the consequences. I'm just going to focus on two aspects of this deck, because in Jund we've got access to absolutely tremendous ramp, really good removal, nice interaction. You can do whatever you want with that, but the bits that matter are the bits I'm going to talk about. First element to consider is how are we going to fill the graveyard? Ideally, we'd like to draw cards and discard to avoid it being at a card disadvantage. So Thrill Possibility and Cathartic Reunion are both great. Faithless Looting gets 2 cards into the yard for 1 red mana and can be flashed back to do it again. Buried Alive is superb. It dumps 3 creatures straight into the graveyard from the deck, so it's essentially a tutor. You don't need luck to find these creatures. Mark Grave is a card that seems like it was purpose made for this deck because it specifically states non-legendary creature to put straight in there. But now we have the tools to get our critters into the bin, let's look at the absolute disasters that we're going to be handing out. First up, Leveler, a 5 mana 10/10 with a tiny drawback. When it enters the battlefield, it exiles the controller's entire library. So when Bullies donates Leveler to someone, their deck disappears. And unless they can win immediately, they lose the next time they need to draw a card. And bear in mind the Beamtown Bullies can do this at any point. You can do it in an upkeep, pre-draw. This is insane. Then there's Eater of Days, a huge flying creature with one of the harshest drawbacks ever printed. When it enters the battlefield, its controller skips their next 2 turns. If someone receives this lovely gift, they're essentially removed the game for quite a while. Another classic is Phyrexian Negator, a huge creature for very little mana. But whenever it takes damage, its controller has to sacrifice that many permanents. So if we give this to an opponent, all it takes is a single blocker or damage source and suddenly half the battlefield disappears. And let's bear in mind that this is goaded. Next, we have the Plague Reaver, a creature that doesn't just cause problems, it wipes boards. And at the end of its controller's turn, they must sacrifice all creatures they control except Plague Reaver. So if you donate this at the right moment, someone's carefully built board state just vanishes. And then there's Hellcarver Demon. This one is less about a small downside and more about absolute devastation. Whenever Hellcarver Demon deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices all permanents they control, discards their hand, and exiles the cards from the top of the library and casts them for free. And remember, the creature we donate is goaded, so the poor player we give this to is forced to attack someone with it, which means if it connects, their entire board disappears. And let's be honest, people won't choose to block this. And when we say entire board, it is the entire board. It's their creatures that disappear. It's their lands that disappear. And no one wants to be missing lands. Their hand disappears, and the game suddenly becomes complete chaos for them. Some of the creatures in this deck don't just punish opponents, they create such a unique board state. Take Tempting Worm. When it enters the battlefield, every player can put any number of permanents from their hand onto the battlefield, which means suddenly the entire table explodes with permanents. Sometimes this helps someone, sometimes it completely breaks the game. Either way, it is pretty hilarious. Then there's Hunted Wumpus, which is a brilliant name. When it enters the battlefield, each other player may put a creature from their hand onto the battlefield. So congratulations to the opponent we give this to, they get that, but they also just help everyone else at the table deploy their biggest threats. And finally, Boldware Heavyweights, a massive creature with a gigantic drawback. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent can search their library for a creature and put it directly into play. So once again, the poor player who gets this ends up helping everyone else at the table, and we all get to tutor up our biggest threats onto the battlefield. Anyway, that's the beating heart of the deck. If you enjoyed this breakdown, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And if you found an even worse creature to donate with the Bullies, I would absolutely love to hear about it in the comments. Until next time, this has been Missing Lands. Take care.